So these are Ossas, and that's a bull taco.
I just picked these two Ossas up in Cheshire, Mass, about 4 or 5 months ago.
There's something completely silly.
So, yes.
So is there any familiar family relationship between the Ossa and bull taco, other than they're both from Spain?
Not that I'm aware of.
So they're completely different
I
companies?
think they were just competitors.
Okay, so how many, like, bull taco was majority dirt bikes or majority street bikes?
They made both.
I know they did.
Yeah,
but-
they made a lot of street bikes.
They did.
Right,
Yeah, a lot of them.
So I don't know which one would be considered predominant,
okay.
but boy, I tell you, the bull tacos were really popular for motocross and for trials race.
And didn't Ossa make
The RM370 in
Okay.
1973. And the story on that is for the first motocross race in Belgium, as it was on the way, it was disqualified because it was too lightweight. So
What was the weight, 188 pounds?
So this one was 207 pounds.
Right, but what was the limit? It was 188 or 200 or?
So I don't know the exact limit,
Okay.
but the Bull Taco, Mako, Husqvarna, all of those European bikes, the weight was about 230.
Okay.
So they were upset because it
Maybe it was
was
218, I heard.
Yeah.
I know it had an 8 in it.
So anyway, what happened was the bike had to be filled with some lead to get it up to weight.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. But with this bike, I met a gentleman by the name of Terry Good. And Terry Good has Roger DeCoster's one bike.
Is that his signature on there?
Yes, it is.
Very good.
So Terry Good also purchased some spare parts. So with the authorization of Roger DeCoster, Terry Good allowed me to buy parts to build this bike. So that's the actual spare works head and cylinder and pipe and airbox.
What year is this?
So this is a 73.
A 73.
73
Okay.
RM.
Okay, so what was the deal though? They built it for him to race all season or just one race?
So all season, and the other thing also he did is he also built what was called a sand tank, because this tank wasn't big enough for some of the motos.
All right.
And so especially if there was sand that was involved, it took more fuel to be able to finish the
Okay,
race. So
okay.
Roger DeCoster was a great mechanic. So one time, and there's some pictures on Terry Good's website that shows, and in his book that shows what Roger DeCoster did, is he had a section built up here to be able to add more fuel. And the other thing also on this bike is these are poppy body conies, but Roger DeCoster actually turned the lower leg. And what they were doing back then is because of the issue with the friction of the shock, it would cook the oil out of the, through the shaft. So they were experimenting with putting cooling fins on the shock body to keep the oil from getting too loose. He actually turned his on a lathe. These are poppy body conies, which is the closest we could get to that because there's only one set of shocks that he ever made.
So are these machined bottoms? These were actually machined to radiate heat.
To radiate heat.
Okay.
And later, of course, they go to the piggyback, to the reservoir shocks.
Okay.
But what we had to do here is when we built this frame, it's all the correct alloy, and also we built external swing arm bearings.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I see that.
when
yeah.
Roger DeCoster inspected this bike at Main Stage in Glendale 3 years ago, it was the only bike on the track before the track walk, and he came out and inspected the bike. A couple of things we had to do is we had to manufacture a shifter that looked like his. We had to also manufacture a couple other parts. We had to manufacture the chain guide.
So did you created something and then had it zinc plated?
Yes.
Okay, because I was going to say that looks way too factory to just weld something and then not have it plated.
But all of the nuts and bolts are titanium. Every nut and bolt on it is titanium.
Okay.
So this is how we were able to get it to the 270.
The bottom end, well, the engine, the bottom end is what? And
That's a great question, because
Yeah.
the bottom end is a 1979 370 bottom end.
So it would
But
be
in
an
19
RM370.
RM bottom end.
Okay.
But the RM came with a reed valve.
Yes,
So we
that's
had
right.
to cut the
Yeah.
reed valve out and re-weld the cases because the 73 bike did not have a reed valve.
Okay.
Who does all the machine work?
Mike Halpin. Now, a guy named Mike
HALPIN? I've heard that name before.
He's a genius.
Yeah,
He
I've
was
heard.
like 65 US patents, about
Yeah.
60, about 5.5 horsepower wasn't enough for $3.
So this is the Pabatco room.
Yes.
Very good. What year is that? That's early. It looks early.
That's a 6590.
6590.
Yeah.
What was the first year?
I think 64.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
All right, take us through these Sudakas.
And
90 is the first Sudaka, is that a 90 somewhere?
so
Who's that?
Just a 90?
Jack, who's that guy from California who shows up every year for the Tiddler ride on that little Hadaka?
I know who you're talking about.
I think it's a 100, but he shows up every year
Dirt Squirt.
for the Tiddler ride.
So is one of these a 90?
this one's a 90.
Okay, so that was the first Sudaka,
The
right?
first, yeah, 90 was the first displacement of one.
Okay, so what did they call that model?
So this is the Ace 90.
So this was the first Hodaka that was imported.
Yeah, and they assembled,
Right.
all the parts came from Japan to Athena, Oregon, and then they were assembled in Athena,
Okay.
Oregon, and distributed from there.
Understood. Okay. Yeah, that is, I don't know if I've ever seen a 65 before.
And it runs and it's just cuter than heck, and it's just fun.
So is this a
Yeah.
92, Barry?
So that is a 73, 74. No, I'm sorry. It's a 75,
It says Ace 100 on it.
73. It's a 1973 100, but it's in a smaller frame called the Dirt Squirt. So I found a poster to go along with it. So I'm building this bike for my wife.
Okay.
So it's a 73, it's a 100cc motor, but the frame is smaller. You can see it sits a little bit lower. And it's called the Dirt Squirt. And they came up with all kinds of fun names. So
What's the Combat Wombat?
that is a Combat Wombat.
Okay.
That's a Combat Wombat.
And then a Wombat is a 125.
That's a Wombat 125, and that's a Wombat 125.
Okay, all right.
That's correct, because the Wombat came out black. They were supposed to be black, but that one's red. They're the same year. So here's the definition of insanity. My wife was on the board for Red Cross Arizona, and they had an event called Wrapped in Red, and she wanted me to donate a red motorcycle. So so what happened was she likes the Hodakas, so I found that the prototype was red. So I bought 2 Hodakas, 2 Wombats to make into one good one, made it red like the Works bike.
Nobody bid on it.
And then I ordered all of the Red Cross stickers, the kits,
First
the
aid.
blanket, first aid kit, and all of that stuff. And then I donated it to the auction.
Right.
The guy that bought it, fine gentleman from, he was the president of Cox Communication here in Arizona. And then he just decided he didn't want it, so I bought it back from him. So that's the definition of insanity.
Either that or philanthropy.
The fun thing about the Montessa is they came polished up. So if you have to restore a bike, it's hard to not over-restore.
Yeah.
That Mako right there, the number 70, is over-restored. So that bike is worth a lot to ride, but nothing to show because it's too shiny. But the Montessas are in good shape. That one's signed by John DeSoto, and he was a world champion on the 250 Capra. And one thing I'd like to show you is the piston that came out of this 360 Montessa. And the fun thing about this bike is it was a unique thing where when you could buy it, I found a magazine article on it, and I had it blown up. And I found in the magazine article that you could buy the bike with the 21 front rim and the small tank for motocross, and you could also have the option to get the desert front wheel with the desert tank. So I thought it would be fun to display it like that. The hardest part was finding the thing to put the tank on,
Barry, I like the pedestal.
and I'm afraid
Very, very nice.
I'm ashamed to tell you, I found that at Hobby Lobby.
Oh, yeah.
This is the piston that came out of the 360, and it had it wasn't functioning well.
No.
Detonation there.
That's some detonation that did. ate that one alive. What did the cylinder look like?
It was, so we had to find a different,
Yeah, that would
a
destroy a
different
cylinder, I would
cylinder
think.
and
Ports and
gears
all.
and everything.
Is that a chunk of rod?
Yeah.
What is?
Yeah, so we just left it in there for the artistic impact of it. But anyway,
Now, when guys restore these bikes, could they put an aftermarket piston in there? That
air cleaner set up in there, but when I took this one apart, I got this one from Coach, way out in Apache Junction. And
Coach,
this was
did you bring him beer?
so bad that I found a rat's nest in the air cleaner. So anyway, it was terrible, but the part that I worked the hardest to find was the pipe. So the guy in Portland had that pipe, new old stock pipe.
Oh my gosh.
And it was the last worst dirt bike ever built.
Yeah, a lot of power, no handling.
Yes.
A lot of power, no handling.
No flywheel.
Yeah.
So
No flywheel.
no flywheel.
So is this a 71?
71.
71.
1 year only bike.
Okay, right, right.
So it's like a light switch. It's either on or off.
On or off.
Oh, these things were just horrible. I mean, you just would kill yourself on that thing.
Yep. And
Yeah.
then the frame would flex, and then the suspension was really, really bad. So the combination was just terrible.
And Suzuki built it because
They were entering into the open class. This is
Okay.
their first open class bike in Japan in 1971.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of parts I need to get done to make it right. I ordered a more appropriate number plates, believe it or not. And these bikes have an oil tank, an oil injected bike. So they have a little hole here where you can see the level of the oil.
Right, so it is an inject, I see the lines going into the
It is.
case and into the cylinder, so it's an injected bike. Okay.
Yep.
You don't see too many of those.
You just, yeah.
No, not a 71.
People hated them.
Yeah, yeah, and rightly so. They were
and there's not a lot of street bikes in here. There's got to be a reason for that.